why does Satan have so much power in our world?
Why does he have so much power in our world? Very good. Think about it this way. If I have the possibility of loving somebody, that's the possibility of blessing them. And so the possibility of not loving them is the possibility of harming them. Love, by its nature, has to contain moral responsibility, I would argue. I can't possibly be empowered to bless you unless I'm also empowered to curse you. And whatever say-so I have to improve your life or better your life, I also have to have to harm your life. And so we're responsible for one another by the very nature of what love is. Our lives, to some degree, hang upon one another. Now, I would also apply that to the angelic realm. They have the possibility of working with God and blessing or working against God and cursing, and that's their say-so. I'd also add this. I call it, in Satan and the Problem of Evil, I call it the principle of proportionality. And that means this, that the extent to which I have the potential to love is also, all other things being equal, the extent to which I have the possibility of not loving. And so the more people and the more deeply I can love, the more people and the more deeply I can bring about harm. It's the principle of proportionality. In the Middle Ages, they had the phrase, corruptio optimi pessima, which means the corruption of the best is the worst. The more power you have for good, the more power you have for evil. There's an African proverb that says, when elephants fight, the grass suffers. And what it's showing there is that when powerful beings go awry, everything underneath them suffers. That's why, the Bible calls leaders to a higher calling, because when leaders fall, it harms everyone that they have leadership over. And so parents have responsibility over their kids, and that's beautiful because they can bless their kids, but if the parents start to, snort cocaine, the kids are going to suffer. And so there's this hierarchy principle that I think has to be there if this is going to be a creation where there's love and moral responsibility. What we see with an Adolf Hitler is simply the reverse of what we see with a Mother Teresa. And they have the power to bless tremendously and the power to harm tremendously. And that's what I would apply to the angelic realm. If as the early church believed, Satan was this archangel that had tremendous, tremendous power to work with God and bring about works of beauty and eloquence and delight and all of that. He had that power to affect all of creation for the better. Well, that means he has to have that same power to affect all of creation for the worse. And if he chooses to fall, now God has to work around that, because if he were to revoke the free will, he clearly never gave them the free will. And so God works around Satan's fallenness, but he still has that authority. Just like when a mother decides to snort coke when she's pregnant, she's still pregnant, and she's still going to be a mother. It's just that now her baby is going to suffer. Now, we may say, well, look, isn't it, why would a wise God leverage so much on Satan and leverage so much on someone like Hitler? That's a fair question. It seems like it's bad management. It's not very cost effective. And I've wrestled with that one a lot. But it seems to me that two things. One is, what looks like one person doing a tremendous amount of harm, or even one angel doing a tremendous amount of harm, is never that simple. Like, it looks like God leveraged the whole fate of the Jewish people on Hitler. But if you look into it, it wasn't nearly that simple. Certainly Hitler bears much, maybe even most of the responsibility. But he couldn't have begun to do what he did if it wasn't for hundreds and thousands of people explicitly working with him. And then if it wasn't for millions of people who weren't necessarily working with him, but just chose to look the other way. And that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for a long history of anti-Semitism in Prussia, going back to the time of Luther. And that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for anti-Semitism that went back to the early church. And so there's these historical forces. There's a lot of responsibility that goes around. It's just that Hitler was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And so it's not all leveraged on one being. So also with Satan, it's not just Satan, but there are angels and principalities and powers and demons that work on his side that oppress the world. The second thing I'd say is this. It always feels, when you lose a bet, it always feels like you bet too much. There's got to be risk involved in creation. And whenever you lose, it will feel like too much was wagered. That's just in the nature of things. Because, in fact, you lost. But wherever the stopgap was, wherever God would limit the potential, whenever we hit the maximum potential, it would feel like too much. It's sort of like playing the stock market, which is maybe a bad analogy today. And I don't know the stock market at all, but I'm told that on certain funds, at least, you can gain so much, this quickly, but you have to be willing to lose this much this quickly. And if you put a stopgap that you sell right here, you're also limiting how much you can lose. If you put how much you can lose, a limit on how much you can lose, you put a limit on how much you can gain. I mean, kind of, roughly, sort of. Non-economist talk here, all right? So my point is this. God could limit our free will and the free will of angels. But whenever we hit the maximum, it would be shocking. Because by comparison, it's the maximum. If the worst evil in the universe was that we had the power to kill an animal, well, when somebody slaughtered a bunch of animals, we'd be going, why would God allow that to happen? So yes, when the maximal free agents fall and blunder and turn evil, it is shocking, it's horrifying. But all I can say is that the risk overall will be worth it overall, and if God didn't risk this much by giving this much potential this way, he then would have to limit how much potential they could have to go to the good and how much potential they could have to love. You can only get a world where there's Mother Teresa's if you risk a world where there's Adolf Hitler's.